Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel, Peter Pettigrew, a name that provokes a strange mix of emotions in many people. To some, he's nothing more than a weak, forgettable wizard. To others, he's the traitor who changed the course of history. We remember him as James Potter's friend, as Sirius Black's and Remus Lupin's companion, and as one of the creators of the Marauders map. But what drove him to betrayal and to serving the Dark Lord? Today, I'll share some lesser-known details that only the most attentive readers of the saga might catch, and try to understand why he became one of the story's most controversial figures. Enjoy watching. Number 1. Childhood, Shadows of the Past. Very little is known about Peter Pettigrew's early years. Even his parents' names are never revealed. His mother is simply Mrs. Pettigrew. What we do know is that he was born in 1960 and began attending Hogwarts in 1971 at age 11. It's likely that Peter's childhood was quiet and unremarkable. Judging by his later behavior, he must have been a shy, hesitant boy from the start. Traits like that often attract teasing from other children, and there's every reason to think he didn't escape that fate. Number 2. The Marauders and Peter, remembering the weak link. The legendary Marauders, James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter, weren't quite the equal brotherhood people might imagine. The books, and especially the films, make it look like Pettigrew was their true friend and peer. In reality, they saw him as weak and unreliable. A stark example of this is the choice to make him the secret keeper for Lily and James. Sirius pushed for Peter's nomination, not because he trusted his courage, but precisely because no one would ever suspect such an unimpressive man would be entrusted with the Potter's fate. Number 3. The Long Road to Animagus. Why he became a rat. The Marauders took on the dangerous, demanding challenge of becoming animagi, so they could accompany Lupin during his werewolf transformations. This process required incredible discipline and effort. Peter was the last to master the change, and his chosen animal form spoke volumes about his character. A small grey rat, in stark contrast to Sirius's imposing dog or James's noble stag. Number 4. Animagus abilities and the secrets of rats. While the books don't explain exactly how animagus magic works, it's implied that animagi in animal form can somehow communicate with other animals of the same kind. That's how Peter, living for years as a rat, learned from his fellow rats about a strange shadow lurking in the forests of Albania. This tip led him to the weakened, wraith-like Voldemort. It's possible he only developed the ability to talk with rats, thanks to spending so long in that form. Number 5. Distrust among Death Eaters, accusations of betrayal. After Voldemort's fall, his followers chose very different paths. Some, like Bellatrix Lestrange, remained fiercely loyal and went to Azkaban. Others, like Lucius Malfoy, managed to disavow their allegiance and carve out safer lives. But even among Death Eaters, rumours swirled that Peter had lured Voldemort into a trap, betraying him to save his own skin. In many eyes, he was a double traitor, first to his friends, then to the Dark Lord himself. Number 6. Voldemort's Wand, the story of its disappearance. Voldemort's wand, the infamous twin of Harry's, played a huge role in both of their fates. After Voldemort was defeated at Godric's Hollow, the wand was left behind in the ruins, and Peter retrieved it. He feared it would be evidence of his involvement in the Potter's betrayal. He hid it somewhere unknown, but years later, after he was unmasked at the Burrow as Scabbers, Peter reclaimed his master's wand and set out to find Voldemort in Albania. Number 7. The Order of Merlin and Bitter Irony. After Peter's staged death, the Ministry of Magic found only his severed finger and concluded he'd heroically died fighting Sirius Black. In recognition of his sacrifice, they awarded his mother the Order of Merlin First Class, the wizarding world's highest honor. This same award had once gone to Dumbledore, Minerva McGonagall, and even Cornelius Fudge. Later, Remus Lupin received it posthumously for fighting in the Battle of Hogwarts. The cruel irony a man who betrayed everyone was immortalized as a hero in wizarding history. Number 8. Peter's wand, a symbol of his nature. Peter Pettigrew's wand was not famous like Harry's or Voldemort's, but it held secrets all its own. J.K. Rowling once said it was made of chestnut with a dragon heartstring core. Chestnut wands, according to Ollivander's notes, are drawn to witches and wizards with practical skill, but can also lean toward dishonorable aims. It fit Peter perfectly, a man clever enough to survive, but willing to betray anyone to do it. When he held that wand, it was an extension of his fear. He used it to blow up a street of muggles framing Sirius Black. He used it to bind Harry Potter in Malfoy Manor. Every spell cast was an act of self-preservation. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius spits, "And you should have died rather than betray your friends." But Peter's wand was not for sacrifice. It was for crawling away alive. That dragon heartstring core burned hot with raw power. It obeyed him faithfully, but without loyalty, just like Peter obeyed Voldemort. The wand was a mirror of his nature, capable of great things, but always twisted toward treachery. Even the wood seemed to warn the world of what he was, a traitor in waiting, clutching a wand that would never save his soul. Number 9. Why Peter wasn't in Hufflepuff. People often wonder why Peter Pettigrew wasn't sorted into Hufflepuff. He seemed timid, eager to please, the kind of boy who'd rather hide than fight. But the sorting hat saw something deeper. In Philosopher's Stone, it told Harry, "You could be great, you know." It spoke to hidden potential. For Peter, that potential was a raw, trembling courage, not the boldness of James Potter charging at danger, but a desperate will to do anything to belong. Peter's bravery wasn't noble. It was the kind that clung to stronger friends. He followed James, Sirius, and Remus into rule-breaking adventures. He learned to become an animagus even when it terrified him. He did it because they did. That took a crooked sort of bravery. The hat knew he wasn't loyal for loyalty's sake, but because he feared being left behind. Between fear and courage lay a narrow edge, and Peter slipped along it all his life. In the end, that edge cut him. He betrayed the Potters not from ideology, but from that same desperate courage twisted into cowardice. He had the guts to face Voldemort when others fled, but only to beg for his life. The sorting hat never lied. It didn't see a hero. It saw someone willing to risk everything, just always for the wrong reason. Number 10. Life with the Weasleys. Years of constant fear. For 12 long years, Peter Pettigrew lived as Scabbers the rat in the Weasley home. He slept in Ron's pocket, ate scraps from Molly Weasley's kitchen, and scuttled across the floor while Arthur read the Daily Prophet. Every day was terror. He knew one slip would mean discovery. The wizarding world believed him dead, honoured with an Order of Merlin. Yet there he was, twitching in a cage, surrounded by the family of his victim's best friend. He feared Fred and George most of all. The twins loved tricks, loved testing new spells. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Ron complained, "Fred reckons I should make you tap dance across the table." Peter would freeze when their eyes lit up with mischief. He knew they saw him as a toy, something to hex for fun. One miscast charm might have forced him back into human form. So he played the perfect pet, limp, lazy, forgettable. It was his only defense. He listened to every conversation, ears pricked for danger. When Ginny cried over lost homework, when Percy boasted about being prefect, Peter pretended to doze, but his mind raced. He thought of Azkaban, of Dementors. He thought of Sirius Black, who would kill him without hesitation. Every laugh from the Weasley hearth felt like a taunt. 12 years of fear, humiliation, and dirt. It was survival, but it was also punishment he gave himself, day after day. Number 11. The Secret of the Silver Hand. When Peter Pettigrew helped restore Voldemort to a body in the graveyard, he thought he had secured his place forever. Voldemort's gift was a shining silver hand. It moved like living metal, stronger than any human limb. In Goblet of Fire, Voldemort's voice was silky as he said, "Wormtail, you have been of service. The silver hand is your reward." But it was no simple reward. It was a leash forged in magic and cruelty. Peter admired it at first. It obeyed his will perfectly. He used it to strangle and silence others without hesitation. It became his badge of loyalty, proof he had been forgiven. But Voldemort forgave no one. The Dark Lord knew Peter's heart too well. He knew the rat would run if given the chance. He made the hand so it would never truly be Peter's. It was Voldemort's judgment waiting in the dark. That moment came at Malfoy Manor. Harry pleaded for mercy. For the first time in years, Peter hesitated. J.K. Rowling describes it. His own silver fingers closed around his throat. The hand turned on him, recognizing the betrayal even before he did. It was Voldemort's way of saying, "I own you, even your death. No second chances, no room for pity." In the end, the hand's cold metal fingers strangled the life from him. There were no witnesses to mourn. Even the Malfoys watched without helping. Peter died knowing his final act of mercy cost him everything. Voldemort had crafted the perfect punishment, a gift that would kill its master the moment he remembered what it was to be human. Number 13. Hidden Parallels. Peter and Severus Snape. At first glance, Severus Snape and Peter Pettigrew seemed nothing alike. Snape was sharp, bitter and brilliant. Peter was weak and eager to please. But both men shared a secret shame. Each betrayed people who had once trusted them. Snape revealed the prophecy to Voldemort, a single act that led to Lily Potter's death. Peter gave away the Potter's hiding place. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius growled, "You sold them to Voldemort. That's why you should have died." The words could have been spoken to Snape in another life. Both men wore masks. Snape played the part of a loyal Death Eater and later pretended to be Dumbledore's reluctant ally. Peter played the loyal friend, then the harmless rat. Each spent years hiding behind lies. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore said to Snape, "You alone know whether it will harm your soul." Those words never reached Peter. He never paused to wonder if his soul was already beyond repair. Their endings drew the final line between them. When Snape lay dying in the Shrieking Shack, he asked Harry to take his memories. He wanted the truth known. He wanted Lily to be remembered. In that moment, he showed a courage that had nothing to do with duels or curses. Peter, in contrast, died choking on his own fear. Even his last gesture, a moment of pity for Harry, was crushed by the silver hand Voldemort had given him. In the end, Snape earned redemption, however imperfect. Harry later called him the bravest man I ever knew. No one spoke such words about Peter Pettigrew. His life was a cautionary tale. What happens when fear rules every choice? Where Snape's courage finally broke the chain, Peter's cowardice only tightened it around his neck. Number 14. Why Peter found Voldemort before anyone else? Peter Pettigrew was never a powerful wizard, but he was a survivor. After Lord Voldemort fell in Godric's Hollow, most Death Eaters either fled or were dragged to Azkaban. Bellatrix Lestrange screamed her loyalty behind bars. Lucius Malfoy bribed the Ministry to escape punishment. But Peter did something no one expected. He disappeared so completely that even Albus Dumbledore believed him dead. It wasn't only fear that made him vanish. It was hunger for protection. Peter knew he couldn't survive without someone stronger to shield him. As a rat, he scurried across Britain, slipping into cellars and barns, listening for whispers. J.K. Rowling described him in Prisoner of Azkaban as a small, weak creature who clung to the coattails of the powerful. He could go anywhere. A mangy rodent no one noticed. While the Ministry hunted known Death Eaters, Pettigrew was learning rumours. In a tavern near Dover, a drunken wizard mentioned a dark shape moving through the Albanian forests. Peter heard it and understood. This was his chance to regain favor. The others hesitated. Even Severus Snape stayed away, hiding behind Dumbledore's trust. Peter had no such refuge. He was despised by both sides. "Without the Dark Lord I am nothing," he once muttered, voice shaking. This desperation pushed him farther than any loyalty ever could. He crossed the sea in the hold of a merchant ship, surviving on crumbs and rainwater. No Auror imagined they should look for Voldemort's servant in the belly of a grain barge. When he finally crawled through the wet leaves of the Albanian forest, he felt relief, stronger than fear. In Goblet of Fire, Voldemort rasped, "Wormtail, you returned to me, more faithful than any other." It was not faith, it was the terror of living unprotected. Peter found the Dark Lord first because he was the only one who needed him more than he hated him. Number 15, relationship with Lucius Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy never tried to hide his disgust for Peter Pettigrew. In Deathly Hallows, when Voldemort's followers gathered at Malfoy Manor, Lucius stood apart, his pale face twisted in contempt. Peter had scurried to his side, trying to be useful. But Lucius only sneered. "Get away from me, Wormtail," he said sharply, as if Peter's presence contaminated him. For a man obsessed with blood purity and family pride, Pettigrew was the lowest creature imaginable, a coward, a traitor, a half-competent servant. Peter felt that scorn every time he passed Lucius in the dark corridors. Narcissa Malfoy never spoke to him unless forced. Even Draco, who had seen enough horrors to be numb, looked at Pettigrew with cold revulsion. In the Malfoy home, Peter became a living symbol of everything Lucius despised. He was proof that Voldemort's army was not only made of pure-blood fanatics, but also weaklings who crawled back out of fear. Lucius could never forgive that reminder. During the weeks before the Battle of Hogwarts, Peter tried to make himself useful. He fetched food, carried messages, polished wands, but Lucius barely acknowledged him. Once, when Pettigrew spilled a vial of potion on the dining table, Lucius snapped, "You are more useless than a house elf." His voice dripped with cold scorn. It wasn't just an insult, it was a sentence. Peter understood he would never belong among the powerful, no matter how hard he grovelled. This contempt helped seal Peter's fate. When his silver hand closed around his own throat, there was no one in Malfoy Manor who would lift a finger to save him. Even then, Lucius watched without pity. For all his own failings, Lucius had never crawled so low. In that final moment, Peter realized he had spent his life serving masters who would rather watch him die than see him redeemed. Number 16. The secret meaning of Scabbers. The name Scabbers was never an accident. Peter Pettigrew chose it because it sounded forgettable. A scab is something you peel away, something you try not to touch. He wanted the world to look past him. In the Burrow, no one questioned why a grown wizard would live as a rat for 12 years. That was the brilliance of the name. It declared, "I am nothing, don't look closer." In Prisoner of Azkaban, Ron said, "Scabbers is useless, he sleeps all day." The word useless was part of Peter's disguise. He knew that if he acted lazy and weak, no one would suspect a murderer in the cage. It worked for more than a decade. Even Fred and George, always suspicious, never imagined Scabbers was the man who betrayed their hero. There is a darkness in choosing to become something despised. Peter could have hidden as a cat, a sparrow, or any animagus form, but he picked a rat, the lowest creature, the animal everyone blames when food goes missing or disease spreads. He wore that reputation like armor. He spent years listening from the shadows. He heard Molly's worries about bills. He heard Ginny crying over Tom Riddle's diary. He even heard Arthur telling stories about the Order of the Phoenix. No one thought the little scab on the floor could carry secrets. When he crawled into Ron's trunk for the train to Hogwarts, Peter felt safe. He believed the name Scabbers would protect him. In a way, it did. Sirius Black broke out of Azkaban, Dementors searched the castle, and still no one thought the pet rat might be the quarry. The symbolism of the name goes deeper. A scab forms over a wound. It hides decay. Peter was a wound in the heart of the wizarding world, the last hidden infection from the war. Everyone thought he was gone, but he was there, festering quietly. When Crookshanks chased him, Peter felt the first true fear in years. Crookshanks knew Scabbers was wrong. Animals sense what humans ignore. But Ron defended his pet. "Leave him alone," he shouted. The name Scabbers was so harmless, so pathetic, no one questioned it. In the shrieking shack, Sirius finally said the truth aloud. "You should have died, rather than betray your friends." Peter cowered. The scab had been ripped away. Underneath was only rot. Some readers think Peter was proud of surviving, but look closer. He never tried to reclaim his name. He never tried to be Peter again. That was the real punishment, living as a creature you despise until you believe you deserve no better. He could have run after Voldemort fell, started over in some hidden corner of the world. But he didn't. He slipped into the Weasleys' kitchen, let himself be adopted. He needed the illusion of family even as he watched them with guilty eyes. When Ron bragged about Scabbers in the Hogwarts common room, Peter almost laughed. "He's been in the family forever," Ron said. It was true, and it was the saddest thing about him. The name was a shield, but also a confession. Scabbers meant small. Scabbers meant worthless. Scabbers meant he had chosen to live as a parasite rather than risk dying for anything. Even Voldemort in Goblet of Fire called him Wormtail, another word for something that writhes in filth. Peter never protested. He accepted every humiliation. He believed it was all he deserved. When Harry faced him in Malfoy Manor, he called him by name. "Peter," Harry said quietly. That single word struck deeper than any curse. It reminded him he had once been human. Scabbers was the mask he wore so long he forgot it was a disguise. He forgot the boy who laughed with James and Sirius. He forgot there was once a time he was proud to be called Pettigrew. Some names are chosen to inspire fear or respect. Bellatrix, Lucius, Severus. Peter picked a name that made everyone turn away. That was his magic, vanishing in plain sight. Years later, when the Weasleys learned the truth, Molly cried for days, not because she pitied him, but because he had lived among her children, wearing the name Scabbers like a disease no one noticed. If he had chosen any other form, the story might have ended differently. But a scab is not meant to heal, it's meant to cover. Peter never healed, he only hid. In the end, the name Scabbers outlived him. In the stories Ron told, it was always my old rat. Even in death, Peter remained small and unloved, just the scab on someone else's story. Number 17, betrayal as a survival strategy. Peter Pettigrew was called a coward all his life, but that word misses something. He wasn't just scared, he was calculating. When Voldemort rose to power, Peter didn't choose a side out of belief. He picked the side that would win. He watched James Potter duel for justice. He watched Sirius Black throw curses with reckless loyalty. Peter chose survival. He didn't stumble into betrayal, he planned it. He knew the Fidelius charm would protect the Potters if no one expected him. Sirius was the obvious choice for Secret Keeper. Peter was the afterthought. That was the genius. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius roared, "Nobody would have believed it of you." Exactly as Peter intended. His betrayal wasn't an accident, it was strategy. He sat in the Potter's house, ate their food, smiled at baby Harry. All the while he was memorizing their hiding place for Voldemort. When the time came, he didn't hesitate. He handed over the secret and ran before the screams stopped. Later, he cut off his own finger. That was no act of panic. It was insurance. He knew the Ministry would believe Sirius killed him. He framed his oldest friend with a single, bloody lie. 12 muggles dead on a city street, all for his own safety. He didn't just run, he vanished. 12 years as a rat, listening, learning. He knew the Order would never look for him. They thought he was dust. Even Dumbledore's great wisdom missed him. That was Peter's talent. He was never brave enough to fight, but smart enough to hide. When Voldemort fell, other Death Eaters claimed the Imperious Curse. Lucius Malfoy bribed his way free. Bellatrix Lestrange screamed loyalty from Azkaban. Peter did neither. He became Scabbers, living under the Weasleys' roof, feeding on scraps. He was patient. He listened to Arthur talk about the Ministry. He heard news about Dumbledore. He learned when Harry Potter would come to Hogwarts. Every bit of gossip was valuable. He stored it all away for the day he would need it. When the time came, he didn't look for Dumbledore's forgiveness. He sailed to Albania to find Voldemort. He wasn't loyal. He was desperate. He knew Voldemort was the only one who could keep him alive. He traded information for protection. Even Voldemort didn't trust him. He called him Wormtail, a name for something that crawls. But he kept him. Not because Peter was strong, but because he was useful. Peter understood that perfectly. He didn't want respect. He wanted to live. In Goblet of Fire, when he cut off his own hand for the Dark Lord, it wasn't devotion, it was bargaining. Voldemort promised to make him whole. Peter would have given both arms if it meant he could survive another day. The silver hand was beautiful and deadly, a gift with a curse inside. Peter didn't care. He flexed the fingers and smiled. He thought he had won. He didn't understand that Voldemort never rewarded loyalty, only usefulness. When Harry pleaded with him in Malfoy Manor, Peter hesitated. For the first time, he remembered a debt. He remembered the boy he orphaned. That tiny moment of humanity killed him. The silver hand closed around his throat. His death wasn't tragic. It was fitting. Voldemort built the hand to destroy him at the first sign of weakness. Peter's entire life was about avoiding that moment, but it came all the same. He was no fool. He knew how the world worked. He saw that the righteous often died. James, Lily, even Sirius. Peter chose to live. To him, that was the only goal worth anything. He didn't want glory. He didn't want power. He wanted to survive. That was the code he lived by. No matter how many friends he betrayed, no matter how many corpses he left behind. Some called him spineless, but he was cunning. He knew which side would win and made sure he was there first. He didn't fight. He watched, waited, then offered his services when they mattered most. In a world at war, Peter was the perfect parasite. He clung to the strong and fed off their protection. He was proof that evil didn't need ambition or ideology, just fear sharpened into cunning. He was the dark mirror of Gryffindor bravery. Not the courage to stand and fight, but the nerve to sell out anyone to save himself. That was his gift. That was his crime. And in the end, even the Dark Lord had no respect for him, only use. When that ran out, Peter Pettigrew died exactly as he lived, alone, afraid, and betrayed by his own choices. Number 18, the consequences of betrayal for the wizarding world. When Peter Pettigrew betrayed the Potters, he thought he was saving his own life. He never imagined he was also rewriting the fate of the entire wizarding world. That night in Godric's Hollow, he did more than deliver a secret. He created a legend. If Peter had kept silent, Voldemort would have searched longer. Perhaps the Potters would have moved again. Perhaps Harry would have grown up with his parents. But Peter gave the Dark Lord the one thing he needed most, a target. In Philosopher's Stone, Dumbledore said the night he died marked the end of Voldemort's reign of terror. But it also marked the beginning of something else, a prophecy fulfilled, a child marked by lightning. When Voldemort's curse rebounded, it destroyed his body. That moment tore his soul apart. The wizarding world celebrated. People lit bonfires. They toasted James and Lily. They called Harry the boy who lived. None of that would have happened without Peter's whisper in the dark. He was the trigger, the invisible hand that set everything on fire. The ministry built a fragile peace on the ruins. Families returned home. Children went to Hogwarts without fear. But the darkness never fully left. Voldemort survived, twisted and bodiless, because he had split his soul. Years later, in Goblet of Fire, Voldemort admitted, "I was ripped from my body, less than spirit, less than the meanest ghost." Peter's betrayal did that. It made Voldemort desperate enough to experiment with Horcruxes. It also shaped Harry's life. He grew up as an orphan. He slept in a cupboard. He never knew his parents. The scar on his forehead was a reminder of Peter's decision to save himself. Sirius Black lost everything that night. His best friends, dead. His name, stained. He spent 12 years in Azkaban, screaming in the dark, because Peter framed him. Remus Lupin lost the only people who ever called him family. He spent years alone, believing Peter was dead, never suspecting the rat he saw once in Ron's pocket. Even Severus Snape's path bent around that betrayal. Snape had begged Voldemort to spare Lily. When she died, his grief became a promise. He would protect her son no matter the cost. The war that came later was seeded by Peter's choice. If Voldemort had not been defeated that night, he would have crushed all resistance. But because he fell, he became a myth, a fear that never died. Peter never understood the scale of what he had done. He thought he was just choosing the winning side. He did not see that he was creating the prophecy's path, making Harry into the one foe Voldemort could never fully destroy. When Voldemort rose again, it was Peter who performed the ritual. He gave his flesh. He gave his loyalty. He gave the Dark Lord a second chance. Without Peter, there would have been no Triwizard Trap, no graveyard duel, no rebirth. He was the thread that connected every moment of terror, but in the same breath, he was the reason hope survived. By creating the boy who lived, Peter also created the one wizard destined to end the war for good. This irony is the heart of his story. He was never powerful, never noble. But he mattered more than he could understand. In the end, Peter Pettigrew was both the destroyer and the unwitting savior. His betrayal broke the world. His cowardice made room for a hero to rise. No monument bears his name, no child learns of his sacrifice. But without Peter, there would have been no end to the Dark Lord. Number 19, his role in Voldemort's resurrection. Peter Pettigrew was never a hero. But when he helped Voldemort rise again, he became something darker. He became the architect of a second war. He began by searching the forests of Albania. He spoke to rats. He crept through cold leaves. He waited for the shape that was less than a ghost. When he found Voldemort, he fell to his knees. He whispered, "My lord!" In Goblet of Fire, Voldemort rasped, "You return to me, Wormtail, more faithful than any other." But that was not true. Peter returned because he had nowhere else to go. The ritual was not only ancient, it was obscene. Peter gathered the bones of Tom Riddle Sr. He stole them from the graveyard in Little Hangleton. He knew the spell demanded flesh, and he knew whose flesh it would be. He captured Bertha Jorkins. He delivered her to Voldemort without question. When Voldemort killed her, Peter did not protest. He watched, silent and sweating. Then he took Harry, the boy who should have been his enemy, the boy who still bore the scar Peter's betrayal had caused. He tied Harry to the gravestone. He did not meet Harry's eyes. When the time came, Peter did not hesitate. He took the silver dagger. He pressed the blade against his own arm. He whispered, "Flesh, willingly given." The knife bit deep. Blood poured over the rim of the cauldron. His hand fell to the grass. Peter gasped, white with pain, but he did not scream. It was not devotion, it was survival. He knew Voldemort would discard him the moment he failed, so he never allowed himself to fail. Voldemort rewarded him with the silver hand. "May your loyalty never waver again," he hissed. The hand flexed, gleaming in the moonlight. Peter cradled it against his chest. Harry watched, horrified. He saw a man who had given everything and still looked empty. That was Peter's true nature, a hollow place where loyalty should have been. Some would call the sacrifice brave, but Peter never acted from courage. He acted because he could not imagine living without someone stronger to protect him. When the Death Eaters returned, they saw Peter as a servant. Bellatrix laughed. Lucius turned away, but Voldemort allowed him to stand close, because a man with no pride makes a useful weapon. The graveyard smelled of death, the cauldron steamed, and Peter Pettigrew held up his bleeding stump like an offering. Years later, when people spoke of Voldemort's return, they rarely spoke of the man who made it possible. They forgot the one who mixed the potion, who whispered the incantation, who gave his own flesh. But Harry never forgot. He saw the look in Peter's eyes when the ritual ended. It was not triumph, it was relief. Relief that he still had a master to follow. In that moment, Peter proved he was not driven by ideology. He was driven by terror. Terror of being alone. That night, Voldemort was reborn. The world shuddered, and Peter Pettigrew stood in the shadows, clutching his silver hand, already planning how he would survive the next storm. Number 20. Why Dumbledore underestimated him. Albus Dumbledore prided himself on seeing the truth in people. He saw bravery in Neville Longbottom. He saw regret in Severus Snape. He even saw a shred of humanity in Draco Malfoy. But he never saw the danger in Peter Pettigrew. Peter was the smallest marauder. He walked behind James Potter and Sirius Black like a timid shadow. Teachers called him forgettable. Even McGonagall once remarked that he was a poor specimen of a wizard. This was exactly how Peter survived. He never stood out, he never claimed credit, he never looked like someone worth fearing. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when Sirius tried to tell the truth, Dumbledore listened but still struggled to believe it. He said, "Peter Pettigrew is dead." He could not imagine that the boy he remembered had become the most dangerous spy in Voldemort's ranks. Peter used this blindness as a shield. He knew Dumbledore watched the powerful and ambitious. He knew Dumbledore's gaze was always searching for dark wizards who hungered for glory. Peter didn't hunger for glory, he hungered for safety. That made him invisible. When he became Scabbers, he slipped into a household Dumbledore trusted. He lived in the burrow, eavesdropping on every conversation. No alarms ever sounded. Years passed, and the Order of the Phoenix returned. Still no one suspected the rat in Ron's pocket. Dumbledore had bigger threats to track. Lucius Malfoy, Bellatrix Lestrange, the Dementors themselves. This was Peter's great advantage. While everyone fought monsters, he survived as a parasite. He was the small rot that spread while no one looked. Even Snape didn't see him. Even Moody, with his magical eye, never realized the truth. When Peter was finally unmasked, Dumbledore admitted his error. He said, "We all have our blind spots." But the damage was already done. Sirius had lost 12 years to Azkaban. Harry had lived without parents. Voldemort had been reborn, all because no one believed a small man could tip the scales. The wizarding world wanted its villains grand. They imagined darkness in towers, in thrones, in armies, but real darkness often hides in small acts. A secret whispered, a betrayal signed, a hand willingly severed. Dumbledore never underestimated Voldemort's power, but he underestimated Peter's desperation. Peter was proof that the quietest people can cause the loudest catastrophes. He never wore a mask like Voldemort, he never declared war, but he slipped the knife between the ribs, while others looked elsewhere. Even after Peter's death, Dumbledore remembered the lesson. Never dismiss the ones who seem too weak to matter. In the end, Peter was not the most powerful wizard, but he was the most overlooked, and that made him the perfect instrument of fate. Number 21. Friendship with Remus Lupin. Remus Lupin had always been the quiet marauder. He was the one who watched the others with tired, gentle eyes. While James Potter planned pranks and Sirius Black charged ahead, Remus kept the peace. He tried to see the best in people, even in Peter Pettigrew. At Hogwarts, Remus knew what it meant to feel small. He was a werewolf, always afraid of being discovered. That secret weighed on him every day. So he understood Peter's weakness better than anyone. He never mocked him. He never called him a coward. When Sirius rolled his eyes at Peter's complaints, Remus would say, "Leave him be, Padfoot." His voice was soft. His sympathy was real. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when the truth finally came out, Remus looked at Peter with such sorrow that it cut deeper than hatred. He said, "I believed you were my friend." The words were simple. They were final. Peter could not meet his gaze. He shrank against the wall, his hands shaking. He knew there was no forgiveness in Remus's voice. That was the tragedy. Remus had defended Peter for years. When other students laughed, Remus told them Peter had a good heart. When teachers doubted Peter's skill, Remus said he tried harder than anyone. Even after James and Lily died, Remus did not suspect him. He assumed Sirius was the traitor. He spent years believing Peter was another victim. When they met again in the Shrieking Shack, that illusion shattered. Remus saw that Peter had not only betrayed their friends, but had done it coldly, without regret. Peter tried to plead. He whimpered, "Remus, you don't believe this." But Remus did believe it. He believed it because he had finally seen what lay beneath the timid mask. There was no kindness there, only a small, grasping fear, a hunger to be protected at any cost. Remus never raised his wand to kill Peter. He left that choice to Sirius. Even then he could not quite erase the memory of the boy he once pitied. When Sirius and Remus planned to end Peter's life, it was not out of rage alone. It was because they knew he would betray again. And he did. That night, Harry stopped them. He begged them to let Peter live. "I don't think my dad would have wanted his best friends to become killers," Harry said. Remus looked at Peter one last time. It was not hate on his face. It was the grief of a man who had lost everything twice. Years later, when Remus told the story, he never softened the truth. He said Peter was weak, and in the end, weakness can be more dangerous than cruelty. That was the lesson he carried to his grave, a lesson Harry never forgot. Remus Lupin had once called Peter his friend. That trust was the final thing Peter destroyed. Number 22, hidden role in Harry's fate. Peter Pettigrew was the unseen architect of Harry Potter's life. Every triumph and every scar traced back to Peter's shaking hands. It was Peter who led Voldemort to Godric's Hollow, clutching the secret Dumbledore had trusted to James Potter. That betrayal made Harry an orphan before he could speak. It also made him famous. Without Peter's whispered treachery, there would have been no lightning scar, no legend of the boy who lived. In Philosopher's Stone, Dumbledore told McGonagall, "He'll be famous, a legend." That prophecy began the night Peter chose survival over loyalty. The irony never left Harry's story. The man who destroyed his family also gave him the power to survive Voldemort's curse. Because of Peter's betrayal, the killing curse rebounded. Voldemort's body was destroyed, but his soul lingered, unmoored and furious. Years later, when Voldemort needed a way back, it was Peter who found him. Peter who nursed the twisted remnant in Albania. Peter who captured Bertha Jorkins. Peter who prepared the ritual that restored Voldemort's body. Without that second betrayal, Voldemort might have remained a spirit forever. Harry might have grown up in peace. But Peter was always the servant who returned, always the hand that lifted the master from the grave. When Harry stood in the graveyard, bound to the headstone, he looked into Peter's pale eyes. He saw no hatred there, only fear. the fear that drove Peter to help kill a child for the second time. In Goblet of Fire, Voldemort praised him. "You have been most useful, Wormtail." But Peter's usefulness was poison. It revived the enemy who would murder countless innocents. Yet even that wasn't the end. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Peter played a final, hidden part. He forced Harry to choose mercy. In the Shrieking Shack, when Sirius and Remus prepared to end Peter's life, it was Harry who stopped them. Harry's voice shook, but he said, "I don't reckon my dad would have wanted them to become murderers." Peter clutched the wall, weeping. He didn't understand he was witnessing a boy braver than he'd ever been. That choice to spare Peter's life became another turning point. Because Harry showed mercy, Peter owed him a debt. The same debt that made Peter hesitate years later in Malfoy Manor. When Harry was captured and dragged before Voldemort, Peter's silver hand was ready to strike. But he faltered. For a heartbeat, he remembered the boy who had spared him. That moment cost him his life. Dumbledore often said choices define us more than abilities. Peter's choices built the road Harry walked, a road paved with loss, but also with the chance to prove his heart. Peter's cowardice taught Harry the price of betrayal. His weakness showed Harry that evil can wear the face of someone ordinary, someone pitied, someone overlooked. And when Harry chose mercy over vengeance, it showed he was nothing like Peter. That moment in the Shrieking Shack revealed the shape of the man Harry would become. Some histories forget Peter's importance. They call him a footnote, a minor villain, but he was the hinge on which the story turned. Without Peter, there would have been no curse scar, no prophecy fulfilled, no final duel beneath the ruined roof of Hogwarts. In the end, Peter was the shadow behind every triumph and every sorrow. He was the reminder that even the smallest coward can change the world. His life was a warning, his death was a release, but his role in Harry's fate was something no one could ever erase. Number 23. Why fans hate him. Readers have never forgiven Peter Pettigrew. He is hated more deeply than Bellatrix Lestrange or even Voldemort, because he was not driven by ideology or ambition, he was driven by fear. He betrayed because he was afraid to stand alone. Bellatrix loved cruelty. She tortured for pleasure. Voldemort dreamed of conquest. Even Dolores Umbridge believed she was serving order. But Peter never claimed any grand reason. He crawled to Voldemort's feet because he could not bear to be unprotected. That is why his story feels so unsettling, because it is too human, too close, too real. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius shouted, "You should have died rather than betray your friends." Readers cheered when he said it, because in that moment Sirius voiced what everyone felt, that some lines should never be crossed, no matter how scared you are. Peter crossed them all. He traded James and Lily's lives for a promise that Voldemort would spare him. He never looked back. He never repented. Even when he trembled before Harry, he never offered an apology that sounded true. He only whimpered excuses. "You don't understand. He would have killed me." Fans hate Peter because he was never powerful. He was never brave. He was the friend you trust who slips a knife into your back when the world turns dark. He was the reason Sirius spent 12 years in Azkaban. The reason Remus lost the only family he ever had. The reason Harry grew up unloved in a cupboard. And yet Peter never seemed to suffer guilt. He hid as a rat. He listened to the Weasleys laugh and argue. He watched Harry at the table and felt nothing but fear that he would be discovered. That is why he is so memorable. Voldemort is a monster you can see coming. Bellatrix is a fanatic you can hear screaming. But Peter is the coward who smiles while he betrays you. It is easier to hate a villain who is proud of their evil. It is harder to face the one who is pathetic, the one who betrays because he cannot help himself. Some readers see themselves in that weakness. They shiver at the thought because everyone likes to imagine they would be brave. But Peter proves that not everyone is. His final moment was fitting, strangled by the silver hand Voldemort gave him, killed by the same fear that ruled him all his life. Even then, he didn't die defending anyone. He died trying to protect himself. J.K. Rowling made Peter a mirror. He shows how small compromises grow into unforgivable crimes, how a man who only wants safety becomes the worst kind of traitor. Fans hate Peter because he never tried to be more than a frightened shadow. He never found the courage to choose something better. Sirius called him the Rat, not only for the animagus form, but because Peter proved that cowardice can be more poisonous than hatred. In every rereading, his scenes feel just as bitter, just as disappointing, because his betrayal is not grand, it is ordinary. That is why it matters. Peter Pettigrew is the reminder that darkness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it squeaks in the corner, waiting for the moment you forget it is there. Number 24, relationship with Crookshanks. Crookshanks was no ordinary cat. From the moment Hermione Granger bought him in Diagon Alley, he had a reputation. The shopkeeper warned Hermione that no one else wanted him. He was ugly, squashed-faced, with a bottle-brush tail. But he was clever, far too clever. Hermione fell in love with him instantly. She defended his every hiss and swipe. But Crookshanks had his own mission at Hogwarts. He stalked Scabbers. He watched Ron's pocket with slit-pupilled suspicion. Ron Weasley couldn't understand it. "He's got it in for Scabbers," he complained. "Crookshanks doesn't even try to hide it." The trio fought about it constantly. Hermione refused to admit her cat could be dangerous, but Crookshanks wasn't simply acting on hunger. He knew something no one else did. He sensed that Scabbers was wrong, not a rat, not a pet, but a man hiding behind fur and whiskers. J.K. Rowling wrote Crookshanks as part Kneazle, a magical creature famed for its intelligence and uncanny ability to spot untrustworthy people. Crookshanks didn't just dislike Scabbers, he hunted him. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Crookshanks watched Scabbers with unblinking focus. He lay in wait in the boys' dormitory. He lunged at Ron's pockets. He followed them through the corridors. Ron saw only a feud. Hermione saw only an overexcited cat. But Peter Pettigrew knew better. Each time Crookshanks glared, Peter felt the cold knowledge that someone saw him, truly saw him. He tried to hide deeper in Ron's robes. He tried to play dead, but Crookshanks wasn't fooled. The cat would sit for hours, tail flicking, golden eyes locked on the rat that wasn't a rat. In the Gryffindor common room, Crookshanks once leaped onto Ron's lap, claws out, and Peter bit Ron in terror, trying to escape. That bite wasn't the act of a pet. It was raw fear. Ron was furious. He shouted at Hermione, their friendship fraying under the strain. Peter loved it. Conflict among friends meant less attention on him, but he still dreaded the next time Crookshanks would come creeping. Crookshanks even joined forces with Sirius Black. In his animagus form, Sirius met the cat in the Hogwarts grounds. They had an understanding. Crookshanks stole passwords to the Gryffindor common room for Sirius. He helped plan the trap in the Shrieking Shack. It was the most humiliating betrayal for Peter. A cat outsmarting him, exposing him, the hunter becoming the hunted. When Ron thought Scabbers was dead, he blamed Crookshanks completely. He yelled at Hermione, calling her cat a killer, but readers knew the truth. Scabbers faked his death, chewed off a paw of fur, ran for his life. Crookshanks wasn't fooled. He prowled the grounds, searching for the scent of the traitor. He hissed into shadows. He waited for Peter to make one mistake. Even in the Shrieking Shack, Crookshanks was there. He curled around Sirius, purring in approval. When Sirius revealed the truth, Crookshanks was silent, watchful, almost satisfied. For Peter, Crookshanks was a nightmare given shape. Not a Death Eater, not an aura, but a creature that simply refused to be lied to. He was proof that no matter how well Peter hid, something would always see him. Something would always know. It's almost funny in a grim way. Voldemort's most useful servant unmasked by a cat who cared nothing for fear, nothing for power, only the truth. Crookshanks forced the trio to confront hard questions. made them fight, made them hurt, but he also made them see. Without Crookshanks, Scabbers might have stayed hidden another year, another chance to serve Voldemort, another betrayal waiting to happen. That's why Crookshanks is one of the unsung heroes of the series. He wasn't fooled by trembling whiskers or pitiful squeaks. He saw Peter Pettigrew for what he was, and he never, ever let him forget it. Number 25, How Peter Saw Harry. Peter Pettigrew could never look Harry Potter in the eye for long. Every time he did, he saw James, the same unruly hair, the same determined stare. It was a ghost reaching out of the past to accuse him. When Harry shouted at him in the shrieking shack, "You sold them to Voldemort!" Peter cringed against the wall, his voice cracked. It wasn't like that. But he couldn't finish the lie. He had been their friend. He had laughed at James's jokes. He had sworn to protect Lily's secret. He remembered the sound of Harry's cries the night they died. He helped Voldemort walk into that nursery without a fight. Years later, in Malfoy Manor, Peter found himself alone with Harry once more. Harry was bound and bleeding. Yet he spoke Peter's name softly. "Wormtail, you owe me." For a heartbeat, Peter hesitated. His wand trembled. He remembered the night in the shack when Harry spared him. He remembered the words, "I don't think my dad would have wanted his best friends to become killers." Those words had haunted Peter. No one else had shown him mercy. No one else had given him a chance to live. In that moment, he didn't see the enemy of his master. He saw the son of the boy who once called him friend. He saw everything he had destroyed, but Voldemort's gift was on his arm. The silver hand twitched. It sensed betrayal. It had no patience for pity. Peter knew what would happen if he let Harry go. Voldemort would kill him slowly. The Death Eaters would laugh while he screamed. So he tried to harden himself. He told himself Harry was just a boy, just another obstacle to his survival. But Harry wasn't just anyone. He was the child he had doomed to an orphan's life. He was the last piece of the family Peter had shattered. For Peter, Harry was a living accusation, a boy who forced him to see the cowardice in his choices. Even when he served Voldemort faithfully, Peter felt the weight of that gaze. He felt it in the graveyard as Harry screamed in pain. He felt it at every meeting where Voldemort mocked Harry's weakness, because Harry's weakness was mercy. The same mercy that had saved Peter's life. When the silver hand strangled him, Harry watched. Their eyes locked for an instant. Did Peter see forgiveness? Did he see contempt? He would never know. His final thought may have been regret. Not for the lives he destroyed, but for the man he could have been. Because Harry reminded him of something he had lost forever. A friendship he betrayed, a family he delivered to death, a loyalty he bartered away for fear. That was the tragedy of Peter Pettigrew. He could see the better path. He simply lacked the courage to take it. Number 26. Why the Hat Didn't Put Him in Slytherin. Many readers have wondered why the Sorting Hat didn't send Peter Pettigrew to Slytherin. On the surface, it seems obvious. He was cunning. He was willing to betray anyone to survive. He was slippery in every sense, but the Hat never judged only by ambition. It searched deeper. Slytherin valued drive, ambition, a hunger to make your mark. Peter had none of that. He never plotted to rule the wizarding world like Voldemort. He never dreamed of power like Lucius Malfoy. He only dreamed of safety. When he sat on the stool as a trembling first year, the Hat peered into his mind. It found no grand vision, no ruthless purpose, just a terrified boy who wanted strong friends to hide behind. The Hat might have whispered, "Slytherin could help you survive." But survival wasn't enough. Slytherins used cleverness to gain something larger. Peter only wanted to avoid pain. What it did find was a flicker of courage, a tiny spark that led him to follow James Potter and Sirius Black into any prank, any secret passage, any adventure. It was not the boldness of a hero, but it was a wish not to be left behind. So the hat chose Gryffindor, because Peter longed to belong to the brave. He wanted to be part of their brightness, even if he could never match it himself. Years later, Sirius would spit at him and say, "You should have died rather than betray your friends." That was the ideal of Gryffindor, loyalty above life itself. But Peter's courage was too small to reach that high. In Philosopher's Stone, Dumbledore told Harry, "It is our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Peter's choice was always to cling to the strongest figure nearby. That was never ambition, it was desperation. And desperation alone doesn't make a Slytherin. The hat has been wrong before. But in this, it was painfully accurate. Peter truly did belong in Gryffindor, because for a time he tried to be brave. When the Marauders first learned to become animagi, Peter didn't quit, though it terrified him. He stayed, because he couldn't bear to be the weak link. That was his flicker of Gryffindor spirit. But the trouble with flickers is that they go out. When Voldemort offered him survival, Peter's courage died without a fight. That is why his story feels so tragic. He had the seed of something better, but it withered every time he chose fear. Some fans insist he was misplaced, that Slytherin would have suited his treachery, but Slytherins betray for gain. Peter betrayed only to delay his own death. The hat saw a boy who wanted to be brave, even if he never could be. That was enough to tip the balance, and so he wore red and gold. He called James and Sirius his brothers. He pretended he could stand beside them. In the end, the colours didn't save him, because the sorting hat can see your potential, but it can't force you to live up to it. Peter never found the courage that Gryffindor demanded. He found only the fear that destroyed him. And that is the saddest truth. He was not a Slytherin who schemed, he was a Gryffindor who failed. Number 27, Peter's death. Karma in action. Peter, Pettigrew's end was written the moment he accepted Voldemort's gift. The silver hand glittered in the candlelight of the graveyard, flexing with unnatural grace. Voldemort smiled coldly as he attached it. "May your loyalty never waver again, Wormtail." It wasn't a blessing. It was a warning. That hand was not a reward. It was a leash. Forged with dark magic, it was built to obey one master's will. It responded to Peter's thoughts, but it held Voldemort's command buried deep inside. At first, Peter saw only power in it. He admired its strength, the way it crushed stones with ease. He liked the respect it demanded from other Death Eaters who shuddered at the sound of metal scraping against bone. But that hand was not his. It was Voldemort's will made flesh, a constant reminder that Peter had no freedom left to lose. When Harry and his friends were captured and brought to Malfoy Manor, Peter was waiting. He watched Harry dragged across the marble floor. Their eyes met for a moment. Peter flinched. Harry did not scream or plead. He simply reminded him, "You owe me." That debt had lingered since the night in the Shrieking Shack, when Harry chose mercy over revenge. Peter remembered. It was written across his pale face, the horror of owing anything to the son of the friends he betrayed. He raised his wand, hesitating. His breath came in shallow gasps. The silver fingers twitched at his side, waiting for his choice. It was the first time in years that he felt a shred of the boy he had been. The marauder who once laughed with James and Sirius. The friend who admired Remus's calm. The coward who wanted so badly to belong to something good. For a heartbeat, he let that humanity speak. His wand lowered, his voice cracked. He chose mercy. And the hand responded, but not with gratitude. It tightened around his own throat. The silver fingers curled like snakes. His eyes widened in shock as the breath fled his lungs. There was no spell spoken, no curse shouted. It was the final silent command Voldemort had left behind. No mercy. Harry watched, horrified. He tried to stop it, but it was too late. Peter fell to his knees, clawing at the metal that would not yield. In that moment, he wasn't a Death Eater or a rat. He was a terrified man facing the sum of his choices. J.K. Rowling didn't give him a noble death. There was no redemption speech, no final act of bravery, just the consequence of a lifetime spent serving terror. He died alone, choked by the very gift he had begged for, a hand given in reward for loyalty that was never real. It was karma made literal. The man who betrayed everyone finally betrayed himself. Even Voldemort far away might have smiled at the irony. He had known Peter better than anyone, known that a man who lives on fear will die by it. Peter's death is a warning buried in the heart of the story, that even the smallest treachery grows, that mercy wasted on the unrepentant can become a weapon in their hands, but also that sometimes mercy fails, because even the most pitiful soul must choose to change. Peter never did. And so his story ended exactly as it had been lived, strangled by his own cowardice.